another shot with the guys in this room, especially Khalil. Winning football games is more important to me right now than making some extra money. So.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months.
Yo to Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, today I wanted to talk about some of my favorite players on the Chargers squad in Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. For those of you guys who've been around, even since my Madden days, you'll know I'm a pretty big Joey Bosa fan. Oh my God, it's Joey Bosa. Every time Joey did something in game, got a new card, whatever. Big Joey Bosa fan since he was drafted. Obviously a big fan of Khalil Mack. And these guys honestly have been awesome to watch just as a fan and their interactions. Don't these guys kind of remind you of like old fishing buddies, right? Who spend hours on end on a boat together without saying 2 words to each other. Those are some of the most powerful friendships on planet Earth, and these guys have it. You know what? Beyond that, right? Beyond the sentimental value of the Chargers and these guys, they did something awesome, right? This past off season. One of the biggest things that you can do in sports is taking a pay cut to stay on your team for the love of the game and the love of your teammates. Both these guys crediting each other for the reason why they made that big move. And today I want to go over, why that's such a big deal, the huge impact it is for us, the fans and the team, but mostly the players, man. This actually is a pretty big opportunity for Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack to better their position before having to look at those contracts in the upcoming season. And boy, howdy, can I tell you guys, I think a monster season is brewing for these dudes. I think the 2024, the stars have aligned, and these guys could see some pretty big numbers. I'm going to explain to you guys exactly why here in just a second. So before we do kick off, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $250. Newcomers, take a look at the special on screen. Aaron Judge. But also, we got a twofer this weekend. You guys get both of these special offers. You can pick out the Clark or Reek special here for half a point. Easy dubs in the chat. Get in while it is available and hot. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take that the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. Mack and Bosa, Reborn. I don't know, something dramatic. You guys know I'm coming from a film world. We try to make things fun and exciting and cinematic and epic. This is a big deal, man. This is a big deal. I'm so excited to talk about these guys because, for one, I've been a big Joey Bosa fan since he was drafted. You guys have heard this story. I feel like that old, partner or wife or whatever that, you've heard the same stories over and over, but it's just a pleasure to hear every single time, right? I've said the story before, but when Joey Bosa was drafted, I remember that being a really tight, draft in my preference between, him and I think mainly Jalen Ramsey. And I remember Joey Bosa and his name being called and getting super excited and getting very anticipant of his rookie season. And it was just a whole journey with Joey Bosa. I think one of the biggest reasons, too, is that in my adult life, or I should say, I guess I was more of, a young adult life at that point. I was really starting to get obsessed with football at that time. I was a pretty big fan early on in my teen years, but man, like as we got into the Bosa era, I became pretty obsessed. And Joey Bosa was one of those guys that, man, he really fired me up as a Chargers fan. And to see his progression throughout the years, and to see him, team up with some really great Chargers pass rushers like Melvin Ingram and now Khalil Mack, it's interesting to see how far he's come and what he's done, recently to stay with the team. Now, even before that, this Chargers team, I think, was looked at in a couple of different lenses, right? The Bolts had a couple of decisions to be made. You guys remember at the top of the offseason, Joe Ortiz was given a pretty big task. This team was several $1 million over the cap. I think it was around 40, was it not? It was a lot. It was a lot of money this team had to make up in order to become cap compliant. And some of the biggest contracts on our books was our pass rushers, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. Now, at that time, even if you go back and look at some videos of my channel, you'll see the speculation growing that we would not be able to afford to keep both of these guys. The other contracts, including the wide receivers and Mike and Keenan, those are other, options for the Chargers to move away from, which ultimately we know what happened there. But I did not expect to have Bosa and Mack on this roster by training camp. I felt like the cap was too restrictive, that there was some question marks revolving around health with Joey Bosa, that the contracts were just too monstrous, that it was going to be next to impossible to pull off. But lo and behold, I think behind the scenes, something was going on all along. Something was happening in terms of the team build that we didn't know as fans. And I think it kind of stemmed from Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh. These guys wanted to make sure there was an identity on each side of the ball. On offense, of course, we're seeing this team build behind the run. We've got a first-round, right tackle franchise player all of a sudden in Joe Alt. That's going to be a big part of that. We brought in fresh running backs and Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins to bring a new look into the run game. We've got a Greg Roman offensive coordinator. Everything's shaping up towards that kind of helping to be our identity on offense. On defense, I think it was always abundantly clear from the get-go, when Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh came onto the staff, that our identity on defense was going to be the pass rush, that we're getting after the quarterback. We're going to be a mean, aggressive, very talented upfront team in terms of pass rushers. And Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, I don't know if they were ever going anywhere. Even with all of our speculation, even with all of our, we're going to get under, the cap and, there's injuries and this and that. Like, I think Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack were a big reason why Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh came over here. Of course, there's Herbert and the connections and all that kind of stuff, but the talent is here. And it feels like they were ready to double down right away. But more so, I think this wasn't going to be possible unless these guys played ball with them. I think, Jim and Jesse Minter, they came into the building and they said, what, this is our identity on defense. We know what we want to do. We're going to set you guys up for success, but we need you guys to work with Joe Hortiz to make it happen. And both of these guys, when approached, made the big decision, right? Like I said at the top of the video, you got to really love your sport. You've got to really love your teammates to do something like this, because at the end of the day, taking a pay cut isn't just, I'm a good fella kind of move, right? It's a big move for your personal life. Like, this is a real life consequence thing. This isn't we're going to go pat the fans on the back. This isn't that we're trying to be a good egg here. This is very, very, I don't know, just it carries a lot of weight, this decision, right? And it's something that almost feels like came easy to both of these guys. Like, they were already in sync. They kind of knew what they're doing. I know Khalil Mack said a couple of times in his interview that they weren't trying to influence each other, either way, but I do think they did, whether it was intentional or not. Both of these guys ended up taking pay cuts in order to stay with the team. Very significant. Very significant. And ultimately, it led to a Chargers season where we were allowed to navigate our cap. We were allowed to get under, honestly. That was a big part of it as well. But as well as keeping these guys intact and being able to build on that edge rusher identity, that's a huge move. And it's one that couldn't have come easy. This is, real life. Millions and millions of dollars. Think about that, dudes. That is life-changing money for guys like you and me. Like, somebody drops, I think it was the Bosa contract, $7 million on my lap. I'm a new man, right? I'm starting businesses. I'm buying homes. Like, that is a big, big move for anybody. Just because Bosa and Mack are professional athletes doesn't take away from that. We got to remember, this is their livelihoods for the rest of their lives. That's a big, big move. And for that to come not just from one of these players, but both of them, is a pretty big deal. Now, taking a look at some of the pay cuts individually, Tom Pelissero tweeted, Khalil Mack took a pay cut from $23.25 million down to $19 million as part of the restructured contract. Now prevents him from being franchise tagged in 2025. I think there was a void year added as well, if I'm not mistaken. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. And then after playing just 14 games past 2 seasons, Bosa also took a cut from $22 million to $15 million, and he got his salary fully guaranteed. He can earn back some more money with incentives, yada, yada, yada. This resulted in a follow-up tweet by Tom Pelissero. Important for the Chargers. Not only do they save $11.25 million in cash, mind you, the two restructures saved them around $24 million in cap space. $24 million. That is some big bananas. Like, really, honestly, like that's a lot, especially for a guy like Joe Hortiz coming into the situation to begin with. that was an impossible situation to navigate, and he found a way, and we were able to keep Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack on the roster. Big deals. But I can't imagine that this didn't happen without the help and influence of Jim Harbaugh, right? I think the Jim Harbaugh effect is already starting to be planted in LA. I think the influence that he carries over how he recruits, in Michigan, coming to how he brings guys in to his team in the NFL, it's kind of being felt. It's kind of being seen. His reputation, his success, his respect, it's drawing players to make big decisions. Now, I would love to see this decision made by Keenan Allen as well, see him stick around. But the fact of the matter is, that's already starting to take place here. And it's not just because Jim Harbaugh is this big name that everybody's trying to, be around or whatever. It's because Harbaugh does help people around him succeed. Wherever he goes, he's been successful. And those teams and those players that found success. So you're trying to get a slice of that in some way. And I think Mack and Bosa, as much as I want to think it was all selfless and they're doing it for the love of the game, I think that's a big part of it. I also think there's a part of it that they think, man, playing with Jim Harbaugh, that could come with some benefit. That could come with some, success as a team. And a lot of the times, even if, a player is not the best at their position, if they're coming from a winning team, it really does help them out. In the case of Bosa and Mack, it could kind of be the best of both worlds. You know what I mean? The Harbaugh effect is alive and it's real, and I do think it did play a hand in this restructure for pay cuts for both of these guys. But it doesn't make it any less a huge decision for both of them. So first off, I just got to say, man, I've done a terrible job at saying it, but mad respect to Bosa and Mack for doing this. That's big. And me as a fan, I don't have to even think about parting ways with one or another, right? They get to stay with us. We get to finally, hopefully, knock on wood, see what kind of damage these guys can do together. We've been waiting for a while. It really hasn't synced up for a full season. It may never. You know what I mean? But I want to see them get another shot at it. That's something Bosa said in one of his press conferences. He wanted another shot with these guys, and specifically Khalil Mack. He wanted to be with him. He wanted to make that magical season happen that both of them have been waiting for, right? And I think it could come this year. I think Khalil Mack in particular has shown a lot of influence, not just in Joey Bosa. Because I do think that, honestly, guys, Joey Bosa, he's always been a very quiet, reserved person. He almost seemed really frustrated at times, especially in the Staley era, right? But when we brought in Khalil Mack, I did see a change in him. And I'll be honest, especially afterwards when we brought in Jim Harbaugh, I saw an even bigger change. But let's start with the Khalil Mack effect, right? Talking about Jim Harbaugh effect, I do believe there's also a Khalil Mack effect. Khalil Mack, a silent leader? I don't even know how to describe him. Yes, he can be outspoken at times, but it really feels like he's the kind of dude that leads with his actions. There's one game in particular that really stood out to me. The Chargers, not a great season. Maybe some ups and downs if I remember. We were playing the Atlanta Falcons, right? And at one point, Khalil Mack rips the ball out of, I think it was a running back. Maybe it was even Kyle Pitts. I don't remember. And he takes it all the way back. I think it was for even a touchdown. That was a big play. And I remember thinking at that time there were some underwhelming performances on the Chargers. Despite the fact that the team has struggled the past couple of seasons, even since we've brought in Khalil Mack, he has been given at 110%. He's been at the same level, no matter what. That's what Jim Harbaugh would call a pro's pro, right? No matter the circumstances, no matter the revolving situation, he's the dude. He's always been the dude, and he will continue being the dude. And that's something I feel has rubbed off on Joey Bosa a little bit. Doesn't it feel that way? Bosa and Mack, the closer that they've gotten, the more that they've gotten to know each other and to respect each other, the more that Joey Bosa, yeah, I will say and admit, he had maybe some maturing to do coming into the league. It feels like that has reached where we were hoping it to reach. Joey Bosa does feel like a new person. Especially these last couple of weeks, man. That's a point I'm coming up to in just a second right now. And it feels like big part of that, big part of his influence, a big part of his, upcoming in terms of that leadership role, that confidence, or whatever you want to call it, has been Khalil Mack. And it's not just Bosa. I've seen it everywhere. Khalil Mack has gotten a lot of guys fired up. Khalil Mack's been the guy out there leading by example. We're very blessed to have him on this team, and I'm so grateful that he didn't depart. He was the guy I was thinking would end up getting traded or cut. I was like, it's got to be Mack. I'm sorry, but the contract doesn't make sense. the injury, not the injury, but just the whole timing and situation of what we're trying to do. I didn't know if it was going to be possible. And I think one of the big ones is that he coming off a 17 sack year would actually hold a little bit of trade value. We didn't even have to entertain any of that. Chargers get to keep him. We get to keep that leadership in the locker room, and maybe once again finally get to see that Joey Bosa effect into action. Now, just as Joey Bosa has been influenced, we will talk about him again in just a second. Khalil Mack looks like a different person too. Just as Khalil Mack has helped Joey Bosa come out of his shell, feels like Jim Harbaugh has done the same thing for Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack, dudes, I don't know if you guys have watched his interviews. Like, a lot of the times he can come off as very serious, right? He can come off as very quiet, not too outspoken. Again, a man that leads with his actions, not his words. Well, this last press conference, it felt like we're talking to a new dude. I don't know what it is. It went from the beast mode. I don't want to say I don't want to get fined. I don't want to get fined. I don't want to get fined. Just kind of keeping that all reserved, not saying much, to really letting loose. Right? It felt like Khalil Mack all of a sudden he was joking around, he was rubbing elbows, he was really being that version of himself that I haven't seen as a fan, because he's always kept that, layered underneath a whole bunch of, serious, got to take it, my actions and my presence seriously. And it's very refreshing, because it really tells me that if a guy like Khalil Mack is starting to cut loose the way he is, it must mean that Jim Harbaugh is doing something right. That press conference was awesome to watch. Khalil Mack is fired up. Khalil Mack and his decision to stay with Joey Bosa, it was a very big decision, but it almost seemed easy because he's starting to see, he's starting to be more outspoken about his camaraderie with his brotherhood in terms of his teammates. Like, it feels so genuine and exciting. And honestly, there's a point as a football fan that you see your team go through the ringer, right? You watch the Chargers lose game after game after game by one score, by 3 points, by a fumble here or a bad coaching decision there, that you watch the team become broken, right? It's a business. They're trying to make money. They're stressed out because things aren't working out the way that they hoped. Well, all of a sudden, it feels like for the first time in a while, this team's having fun. I do remember a season like that with Anthony Lynn. It was a fun season. I think we ended up getting a pretty good record that year, right? It was a 12-win season for, I don't remember. I think it was like a 12-win season. It was a very good year. I just looked it up. Yeah, there it is right there. Anthony Lynn. It was a 12-4 season in 2018. That was a good year. It felt like the guys were cutting loose and having a good time. It feels like the Chargers are kind of getting back to that point for the first time in forever, right? It's been stressful as a fan. That secondhand stress from the team. Like, man, I get it, dude. We hit a string of bad luck. No one can stay on the field. We're messing up left and right. Things aren't working out the way we'd hoped. We were great on paper, but can't execute. Like, all that does lead up to a lot of stress for these guys trying to get big contracts, trying to navigate the league. Now I see the fun coming out. Joey Bosa. This dude's got one of the driest personalities maybe on the team. Even the way he talks, it's a little slower, it's a little simple, but he is a good guy, right? And watching his press conference and the way he was cutting loose and the way he was joking and the way his confidence was, it spoke a lot, man. It really, really does. And again, this is something that maybe not a lot of people even care about. I know there's probably people that tuned out by now, like, man, what are we talking about? Guys are fired up or guys are happy or whatever. This is football. That's a huge part of the game, in my opinion. Huge part of the game is love of the game and confidence, right? And Jim Harbaugh is instilling that. This whole conversation that we've had about culture and building, an environment rather than a team and an uplifting, just a culture. It's all very relevant to success, in my opinion. And watching guys like Bosa and Mack, who these guys are very quiet and not very outspoken, seeing these guys, the way that they spoke and the confidence that they had in those press conferences, speaks volumes to what I think that environment is like in the locker room and on the practice field. And it's big. It's very big. Bosa was joking a lot, talked about how he was very excited to see Joe Alt, right? And how he was going to give him some grief out there in training camp. But mostly one of the biggest things that made me excited was how confident Joey was telling us that he was healthy. He said, guys, I know we've talked about it several times and it's not really worked out the last few seasons, but trust me, like, it's different this year. We're feeling good. He credited Ben Herbert to that, which is a big reason why so many of us were excited to see that change behind the scenes. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Player confidence is looking good. Players are looking healthy. And ultimately, this team has set them up. This is where the business decision, I think, kind of meets the road in terms of love of the game and business. Joe Ortiz has set these guys up for success big time, right? Yes, they had to take some pay cuts, which ultimately is, just money lost. It could result in being more of an investment, though, because if these guys have a big season with Khalil Mack entering a contract year, that's a big deal. With Joey Bosa, only a few years left, that's a pretty big deal. You can look at it as more of an investment. And Ortiz is setting them up for a very good return. Think about what this position looks like on the Chargers, right? Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack was already great. We had drafted Thule last year. That's already a great edge 3. Like, at that point, I felt pretty good. And then all of a sudden, we brought in this guy, Bud Dupree. Why? Why did we do that? Well, it's just to add to the arsenal of what the Chargers have at edge rusher, man. Keeping these guys rotated and fresh, which we're going to get into in just a second, that's a pretty big deal. So not only do the Chargers have Thule, who had, 4 or 5 sacks, I think 4.5 sacks last season, very good in his rookie year. He looks like he's fresh, for a breakout, ready for a breakout any day now. We bring in Bud Dupree, who logged 6.5 last year in a rotational role. He's kind of, been up and down, but he's been really consistent in terms of his contribution. Excuse me, over here. He's been pretty consistent in his contributions, right? He's a great pass rusher. He would have been a really good, signing for someone who needed a starter. That's what Bud Dupree is. And Joe Ortiz leaning into that strength, leaning into that identity of we are a pass rushing monster, beast of a unit, is going to ultimately help Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. At the very start of it, the freshness is what we'll call it. Keeping these guys rotated, keeping them healthy, all of a sudden became a much more possible feat, right? Keeping these guys on the field is super important. That's been a big problem with Joey Bosa the past couple of seasons. We had 1 year with Khalil Mack, his last year as a Bear, where he wasn't able to stay on the field. By the way, Khalil Mack, outside of that one season, I think he's only missed 2 games in his career, which is extremely impressive, okay? But the freshness is a big, big concept for this team that I think is going to be very important in the long run. Not only do you have the insurance of, hey, man, if somebody does go down, knock on wood, we got a guy that can step in Thule right away. God forbid something worse happens, we got another guy that can step in Bud Dupree. But I think the ultimate decision there, the ultimate reasoning for that decision there was to keep these guys rotated in very frequently. Right? You get Bosa and Mack in there while they're ready to go and foaming at the mouth. And then once they're gassed a little bit, then you put in Thule, right? Or once one of them's gassed, you put in Thule, who's foaming at the mouth, getting ready to get to the quarterback. Maybe you got to rotate one more time with Bud Dupree. Everybody's going to be nice and fresh and mean and ready to go on that line pretty much at all times, which is a luxury I can't say I've ever seen as a Chargers fan, right? The Seans, maybe, Sean Phillips, Sean Merriman, that era, very, very good. I think this is the best era in terms of Chargers pass rush that I've seen since then. And it's a very, very big deal. And it's a big reason why I think Joe Ortiz and Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh, all these guys, wanted to lean into Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. This is our thing. We're a punchy-in-the-mouth run team, and we're a punchy-in-the-mouth pass rushing unit, and it is going to pay off. We're going to see the benefit of that very quickly at the top of the season. Joey Bosa as well, if you take a look at his career, I would speculate that some of his best seasons comes when he's got some pretty good help, right? I would highlight Joey Bosa. The reason why he's a big name in the league, the big reason why that he's got star status is because of his first 4 seasons in the NFL. Sure, coming out of college, he was a big prospect, a top 5 pick. Like, he's a big deal in that terms. But in terms of his translation and success, I would say it was his seasons in 2016 and 2019 that gave him that title. He was awesome. He was a beast. He was a monster, coming into the league. I would argue in those seasons, a big reason for that is because he had help. Bosa, I think the best version of Bosa that we've seen is when he's got help. And in those seasons from 2016 and 2019, where he logged, I think it was 40 sacks, right? 40.5 sacks. That was also a very good run by Melvin Ingram, if you guys recall. From 2016 to 2019, Melvin Ingram posted 32.5 sacks. That tandem, that duo was awesome. And it feels like at that point, Joey Bosa, something was unlocked in him when he had that sort of help. And it's not a fluke, or it's not something that's like, oh, it's because they're motivating each other. It's because, quite honestly, when you're looking at a line and you're trying to determine what resources you're putting in stopping Bosa, when you've also got Melvin Ingram on the other side, you just normally don't have the numbers to make that happen, to make that work. There's just too much. There's too much. And Joey Bosa benefited off of that a lot. So did Melvin Ingram. They benefited off of each other quite frequently. That, I think, was the vision when Brandon Staley brought Khalil Mack into the fold to begin with. Having to account for both of them, it's not going to be easy for any team. What Joe Ortiz has done is he's doubled down. He says, hey, it's not easy. It's certainly not easy for you guys to have to account for 3 of them with Thule in the mix now. Let's throw a 4th with Bud Dupree into there too. I think it was 2020, right, when Melvin Ingram ended up going to the Dolphins, if I recall. Maybe it was the Steelers. That we saw a little bit of a dip. Still a solid season. He did miss some games. He was on pace for a really good season. But then after that, of course, the last 2 seasons, which is going to be freshest on our minds, he did miss a lot of time. In 9 games, 6.5 sacks was great. In 5 games, 2.5, that was definitely his worst season. Getting him some help, though, I think is really going to help his performance and ultimately, unlock something like we saw in his first 4 years in the league. And it's the best position he's been in since then, if I'm being quite honest. Khalil Mack's going to continue his run. I think, honestly, his late run is going to be one of those outliers that we see as NFL fans that people reference to all the time. Right? Is it time to give the such and such or so and so an extension? Maybe, Khalil Mack did it with the Chargers. You know what I mean? Like in his last 4 seasons, there's no reason we can't sign this guy. He's going to be an example going forward. That 17 sack season was absurd. Do I think that happens again? No, but I do think that he's primed for a late run where he's still very relevant as one of the best pass rushers in the league, even in his mid-30s. All right? Finally, one of the biggest points I want to make in this video, guys, congratulations if you made it this far. One of the biggest points I want to make in this video, why I do think they're having a monster season is brewing. Like there's a chance that we see Bosa and Mack really pop off this year, is because the schedule reflects it. The schedule reflects a monster season for our pass rushers. It really does. Now, let's take a look here, guys. What we're looking at right now are the passing stats for the NFL this season. If you take a look right above my head here where it says sacks, this is how many sacks a team had allowed in 2023, just last year, okay? It's not a perfect reflection of what an offensive line looks like. This year, of course, there's a lot of movement, free agents, certainly the draft. Things can change, but a lot of these teams are going to continue seeing some of this lack of success in terms of pass protection, okay? So on our schedule, we've got 3 teams with a top 10 offensive line in terms of pass protection, okay? And in sacks allowed last year, right? A top 3 team, right? They were the best at protecting their cornerback or their quarterback. Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, they were a very good team last year. Only allowed 28 sacks, okay? Big deal. The New Orleans Saints, who we're going to be facing, only allowed 35 sacks. Good line work from them there. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers. Outside of that, everybody else is going to be a little bit different, right? We're going to face the Buccaneers. They allowed 40 sacks. We can definitely work with that. The Raiders allowed 40 sacks. You know how many of that was Khalil Mack? A lot. Okay, they allowed 40 sacks. Excuse me, let me make sure you guys can see this. Chargers are also facing the Atlanta Falcons. 40 sacks allowed. The Baltimore Ravens, shockingly, 41 sacks allowed. The Cardinals, 42 sacks allowed. 6 teams on our schedule only have around an average line. That's, to me, like in the middle, right? Between, like 11 and I think it's 22, right? We can work with that. When you're talking about a team with a premium pass rush, tandem of Bosa and Mack, and you're at a premium depth in Thule and Bud, like average lines need to be looked at a little bit different. We're getting in. Like we're going to find a way. And we're also facing, by the way, the Cleveland Browns, who are just fringe out of the top 10, or the bottom 10, I should say, who allowed 45. Outside of that, we're facing 5 teams with a bottom 10 line this year. 5. One of them we played twice. Look at this. New England Patriots allowed 48 sacks last season. New England Patriots. We are facing them late in the season. Joe Burrow got sacked 50 times. Or I should say the Bengals 50 times. They've needed to do some work on that offensive line. That's an angle for us to get in. The Denver Broncos, who've had a horrible line for years now, 52 sacks. And then the matchups that make me like just so excited for the defense. Tennessee Titans, 64 sacks. I know they got J.C. Latham in there, right? They made some moves. But Latham, as good as he is, a run blocker, I don't know how much he's going to affect the pass blocking. He will help. 64 sacks, give it to me, man. Carolina Panthers, 65 sacks. Are you kidding me? The schedule's lined up in a way where the Chargers, 11 out of the 14 teams that we play are a bottom half unit. That's insane to me, right? Or an average or worse, right? Teams. That's insane to me. And Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, I think you take that into account. You take into account that they've got premium depth, that they're going to be rotating in, that they're both coming into a season where the situation looks really good in terms of coaching. It really does reflect on what I think is going to be a very successful season for both of them. The pay cut's respectable. Sticking together is respectable. Their bond, their friendship is admirable. But ultimately, the situation does give me hope that they could have pretty dang good seasons. And I'll give you guys some predictions here at the end here. I got Joey Bosa going for 12 sacks in 2024. Very respectable, right? Not a career high, but definitely very, very good. I think 12 sacks, and this is me kind of, I'll be honest with you guys, being a little conservative. I think 12 sacks for Joey Bosa, very real. I think Khalil Mack, 10.5 sacks. Very real. And this is me being real. This is me being like, oh, we're being optimistic. Like, this is my very, very real take on what I think these guys can do in this situation with this schedule, with all the surrounding circumstances. Like, very real possibility these guys pop off for a very good season. Resulting in 22.5 sacks of the team total is big. That could end up being like just under half of our team total. I think this team, honestly, this year with the way that they're operating, the way that they've been built, this is a 50 sack plus team in 2024. Honestly, truly. And that's really freaking good. This last year, I think we got 48. That's one of the best pass rushing seasons I've seen in a long time. Now that you insert Bud, now that you insert, the way that this team's being built on defense, this is definitely the cornerstone of that unit, the cornerstone of the identity on defense. Like, sky's the limit. And if these guys can stay healthy, watch out. This Chargers team could end up being a top 5 pass rushing team in the NFL if all things kind of sync up that way. So, and that's not even mentioning the other guys, right? You got Morgan Fox in the interior and some help in there too. So, big things are coming. Big things are coming. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Again, more of a ramble today. Wanted to talk about Mack and Bosa because some of my favorite players. And honestly, I truly do believe that this identity on defense of them, the pass rushers leading the team, it's something that could pay off. And Jesse Minter and this defensive, system, it could unlock that in so many different ways. Well, guys, thanks for joining me. This has been The Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on the way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Give me 25 sacks, right? Combine 25 sacks for Bosa and Mack. I think that would be super sick.